Some thoughts. Concerning Education by John Locke. Quotes. Some Thoughts Concerning Education by John Locke is a groundbreaking treatise on the philosophy of child-rearing, first published in 1693. Locke provides a comprehensive guide for parents and educators on how to shape the moral, intellectual, and physical development of children, emphasizing the importance of cultivating virtue, sound judgment, and resilience over mere academic achievements. Locke's approach challenges traditional punitive education methods, advocating instead for a balance of reasoned guidance, discipline, and the nurturing of a child's natural curiosity. His emphasis on habit formation, practical learning, and the cultivation of a rational mind laid the foundation for modern educational theories and had a profound influence on Enlightenment thinking about human development. Quote 1. A sound mind in a sound body is a short but full description of a happy state in this world. This quote highlights the importance of both mental and physical well-being in achieving happiness. Locke emphasizes that without either a healthy body or a well-directed mind, one cannot find true fulfillment. He further explains that while a few individuals may possess natural gifts that lead them to greatness, the vast majority are shaped by their education. This stresses the lasting impact of early childhood influences on a person's life, illustrating that the smallest impressions made during this time can have profound effects. Quote 2. Our bodies will endure anything that from the beginning they are accustomed to. Locke argues that the human body can be trained to withstand various environmental factors, including cold and heat, if such conditioning begins early in life. He provides examples from different cultures where individuals adapt to extreme climates through gradual exposure. The point made here is that habits formed in childhood, whether in exposure to cold or physical endurance, are key to hardening the body and preparing it for the challenges of life. Quote 3. The great principle and foundation of all virtue and worth is placed in this, that a man is able to deny himself his own desires, cross his own inclinations, and purely follow what reason directs as best. Here, Locke emphasizes the moral strength required to govern one's desires and follow reason. The ability to suppress immediate desires for the sake of rationality and virtue is presented as the core of moral education. Locke suggests that parents should instill this discipline in children from a young age, so that they grow into adults who can make reasoned decisions rather than succumbing to whims and appetites. Quote 4. The great mistake I have observed in people's breeding their children has been that this has not been taken care enough of in its due season, that the mind has not been made obedient to discipline and pliant to reason, when at first it was most tender, most easy to be bowed. Locke expresses concern that many parents fail to educate their children in self-discipline when they are young and most susceptible to influence. He argues that early childhood is the ideal time to mold the mind to accept reason and discipline. If missed, this opportunity results in children developing unruly habits that become difficult to correct later in life, leading to adults who lack self-control. Quote 5. The having desires accommodated to the apprehensions and relish of those several ages is not the fault, but the not having them subject to the rules and restraints of reason. Locke acknowledges that it is natural for people, including children, to have desires, but he points out that the problem lies in failing to subject these desires to reason. This quote underlines the necessity of training children to govern their inclinations with rational thought, so that they grow into adults who can manage their desires appropriately, rather than being ruled by them. Quote 6. Custom settles habits of thinking and acting in children, which, once established, are very hard to alter. Locke stresses the importance of habitual actions and thoughts in forming a child's character. Early habits, both good and bad, can become deeply ingrained and difficult to change as the child grows. Therefore, parents must be cautious about the behaviors and thought patterns they allow their children to develop. as these will likely stay with them into adulthood, shaping their future behavior and success. Quote 7. The principle of all virtue and excellency lies in a power of denying ourselves the satisfaction of our own desires, where reason does not authorize them. This quote emphasizes that true virtue is rooted in self-control and the ability to resist impulses and desires when they are not sanctioned by reason. Locke suggests that the development of this discipline should begin in early childhood. By not yielding to every whim and desire, children will grow up to understand that virtue is about mastering one's instincts and desires, rather than being governed by them. Quote 8. Would you have your son obedient to you when past a child? Be sure, then, to establish the authority of a father as soon as he is capable of submission, and can understand in whose power he is. Locke argues that parental authority should be instilled early, when children are still young and able to comprehend their dependence. By ensuring that children respect and obey their parents from an early age, parents lay the groundwork for continued obedience and respect as the child grows. This early establishment of authority creates a balance where the child, upon reaching adulthood, sees the parent as a friend rather than a strict authority figure. Quote 9. Those children who have been most chastised seldom make the best men. Locke here warns against excessive punishment, pointing out that frequent physical discipline does not necessarily produce well-behaved or virtuous adults. He advocates for a more balanced approach, where strictness is applied early but gradually lessened as the child grows and learns to govern their own actions. Excessive punishment can break the spirit, leading to either rebelliousness or a lack of vitality in adulthood. Quote 10. A compliance and suppleness of their wills being by a steady hand introduced by parents, before children have memories to retain the beginnings of it, will seem natural to them. Locke stresses that the key to instilling obedience and proper behavior in children is to start early. If parents apply discipline consistently and with firmness from infancy, children will grow up thinking that obedience is natural. This early molding of behavior is crucial to prevent future struggles with discipline and obedience as the child matures. Quote 11. Esteem and disgrace are, of all others, the most powerful incentives to the mind, when once it is brought to relish them. Locke highlights the importance of praise and shame in shaping children's behavior. When children are made to value being esteemed and fear disgrace, they become more inclined to act virtuously. These incentives are more effective than physical punishments, as they appeal to the child's developing sense of self-worth and social standing. Quote 12. The usual lazy and short way by chastisement and the rod is the most unfit of any to be used in education. Locke criticizes the reliance on corporal punishment as a primary means of discipline. He argues that such methods only teach children to avoid immediate pain, rather than instilling true self-discipline or a love for learning and virtue. Locke promotes using reason, praise, and shame as more effective and lasting methods of guiding children's development. Quote 13. Frequent beating or chiding is therefore carefully to be avoided, because this sort of correction never produces any good, farther than it serves to raise shame and abhorrence of the miscarriage that brought it on them. In this quote, Locke suggests that corporal punishment and constant scolding have limited value in education, as they only induce temporary feelings of shame. He argues that real, lasting change in a child's behavior comes from cultivating their inner sense of right and wrong, rather than from fear of external punishment. Quote 14. 'Tis virtue, then, direct virtue, which is the hard and valuable part to be aimed at in education, and not a forward pertness, or any little arts of shifting. In this quote, Locke emphasizes that the primary goal of education should be to instill genuine virtue in children, rather than focusing on superficial skills or clever tricks that may seem advantageous in the short term. Virtue is the foundation of a good character and should be prioritized over other accomplishments. Locke suggests that once a person values virtue, other achievements will naturally follow. Quote 15. Maxima debetur pueris reverentia. You must do nothing before him, which you would not have him imitate. Locke stresses the importance of setting a good example for children, noting that they learn much more from observing the behavior of adults than from being told what to do. If parents or teachers engage in actions they would not want their children to imitate, they undermine their own authority and set a confusing standard. Locke advises that adults must show the utmost respect to children by demonstrating behavior worth following. Quote 16. None of the things they are to learn should ever be made a burden to them or imposed on them as a task. Locke argues that learning should not feel like a heavy obligation for children, as this approach leads to aversion rather than enthusiasm. He suggests that when education feels like a duty or task, it quickly becomes something the child dreads. Instead, Locke advocates for making learning enjoyable and aligned with the child's natural curiosity, thereby fostering a love for education. Quote 17. The right way to teach them those things is to give them a liking and inclination to what you suppose to them to be learned, and that will engage their industry and application. Locke proposes that the best method of teaching is to inspire children to develop an interest in the subjects they are learning. Once children have a genuine desire to learn, they will put forth effort and be more diligent in their studies. This approach encourages long-term engagement with learning, rather than forcing children to study out of fear or obligation. Quote 18. Children should, from their first beginning to talk, have some discreet, sober, nay, wise person about them, whose care it should be to fashion them aright, and keep them from all ill. Locke highlights the importance of surrounding children with wise and responsible adults from the earliest stages of their lives. He believes that early education should not be left to chance or ill-suited individuals, but should be guided by people who can instill good habits and moral principles. This early guidance helps shape the child's character and prepares them to navigate the world with integrity and virtue. Quote 19. But passion and violence upon every little slip is not the way to remedy it, for such carriage may breed an aversion to your government, and make them think that the fault was not so much in them as in your harsh and hasty temper. Locke advises against the use of anger and physical punishment in disciplining children, especially for minor mistakes. He argues that harsh treatment can backfire by causing children to resent authority rather than learn from their mistakes. Locke encourages a calm, reasonable approach that addresses the behavior without causing emotional harm or alienation. Quote 20. Virtues and vices can by no words be so plainly set before their understandings as the actions of other men will show them, when you direct their observation. Locke believes that children learn best through observing the behavior of others, rather than from verbal instructions or moral lessons. By guiding children to notice virtuous or immoral actions in those around them, parents and educators can more effectively teach them to differentiate between right and wrong. This method leaves a stronger and more lasting impression than abstract explanations. Quote 21. The great work of a governor is to fashion the carriage and form the mind, to settle in his pupil good habits and the principles of virtue and wisdom. Locke emphasizes that the main responsibility of a tutor or governor is not merely to teach academic subjects, but to cultivate good habits and instill the principles of virtue and wisdom in their pupils. The governor should guide the student to develop a love for what is praiseworthy, encourage industry, and shape the student's character. Academic learning is secondary to the formation of a well-rounded, virtuous individual who will continue to grow through self-discipline and experience. Quote 22. The sooner you treat him as a man, the sooner he will begin to be one. Locke suggests that treating young people with respect and engaging them in serious discussions encourages their maturity. By involving them in important conversations and giving them a sense of responsibility, parents can accelerate their intellectual and emotional development. Locke argues that when children are treated with respect and included in discussions, they grow into responsible, thoughtful adults more quickly. Quote 23. But when your son sees you open your mind to him, when he finds that you interest him in your affairs, as things you are willing should, in their turn, come into his hands, he will be concerned for them as for his own. Locke points out that involving a child in family affairs and showing trust in their judgment fosters a sense of responsibility and ownership. This builds a stronger bond between parent and child, as the child feels valued and trusted. The child is more likely to be invested in the family's concerns and to develop a deeper understanding of what it takes to manage life's challenges. Quote 24. Children love liberty, and therefore they should be brought to do the things are fit for them, without feeling any restraint laid upon them. Locke acknowledges that children naturally desire freedom, and he advises that education should be structured in a way that allows them to feel autonomous. By guiding them to do what is right without making them feel restricted, children are more likely to embrace responsibility willingly rather than resist out of a desire for independence. Quote 25. They would have their desires submitted to by others. They contend for a ready compliance from all about them. Locke observes that from a young age, children exhibit a desire for power and control over their surroundings. He warns that if not corrected, this natural inclination can lead to unjust behaviors and selfishness in adulthood. Parents must gently curb these early tendencies and teach children to respect others' needs and wishes, promoting fairness and self-discipline. Quote 26. That which parents should take care of here is to distinguish between the wants of fancy and those of nature. Locke stresses the importance of teaching children to differentiate between genuine needs and whims driven by desire. He advocates that parents should provide for a child's natural needs, such as hunger or cold, but should not indulge every fanciful wish. This helps children learn self-control and prevents them from growing into adults who are ruled by their desires. Quote 27. The obstinate or stomachful crying should by no means be permitted, because it is but another way of flattering their desires, and encouraging those passions which 'tis our main business to subdue. Locke argues that allowing a child to cry obstinately to get their way reinforces bad behavior and indulges their unchecked desires. He suggests that such behavior must be addressed firmly to prevent the child from using emotional outbursts to manipulate situations and avoid discipline. Teaching children to manage their emotions is central to helping them grow into reasonable and self-controlled adults. Quote 28. Children should from the beginning be bred up in an abhorrence of killing or tormenting any living creature. Locke stresses the importance of instilling compassion and a sense of responsibility in children toward all living beings. By teaching them to care for animals and avoid causing harm, parents and educators can nurture kindness and respect for life. This lesson, Locke argues, forms the foundation for a more empathetic and peaceful society, as cruelty to animals can lead to a hardened attitude toward people. Quote 29. Curiosity in children is but an appetite after knowledge, and therefore ought to be encouraged in them. Locke believes that children's natural curiosity should be nurtured and encouraged, as it is their primary tool for learning and understanding the world. Rather than dismissing their questions, adults should provide clear and thoughtful answers, guiding them toward knowledge. By doing so, children will develop a love for learning that lasts throughout their lives, preventing boredom and aimlessness. Quote 30. Lying is so ready and cheap a cover for any miscarriage that a child should be brought up in the greatest abhorrence of it imaginable. Locke warns against allowing children to develop the habit of lying, as it is a vice that easily takes root and leads to further dishonesty. He emphasizes that parents must instill in their children a deep aversion to lying, as it destroys trust and integrity. By teaching children the value of truthfulness from an early age, parents help build their character and reputation as honest individuals. Quote 31. The first time he is found in a lie, It should rather be wondered at as a monstrous thing in him than reproved as an ordinary fault. Locke suggests that when a child lies for the first time, it should be treated as a shocking and unusual event rather than a common misbehavior. By expressing surprise and disappointment, rather than immediately punishing the child, parents can emphasize how serious and unacceptable lying is. This approach helps to instill a stronger sense of guilt and discourages future dishonesty. Quote 32. The esteem they have for one thing above another, they borrow from others, so that what those about them make to be a reward to them will really be so. Locke observes that children often value things based on how others perceive them. If parents and educators emphasize certain activities, like learning or reading, as rewarding and desirable, children will adopt these views and be motivated to pursue them. By shaping the way children perceive rewards, adults can encourage behaviors that promote their growth and development. Quote 33. This delight they take in doing of mischief is but a foreign and introduced disposition, an habit borrowed from custom and conversation. Locke argues that children's inclination to cause harm or engage in destructive behavior is not natural, but learned from their surroundings. If they are exposed to cruelty or encouraged to enjoy the suffering of others, they will develop these harmful tendencies. Therefore, it is crucial for parents and educators to monitor the influences in a child's life, ensuring that they are surrounded by examples of kindness and empathy. Quote 34. Let him know that 20 faults are sooner to be forgiven than the straining of truth to cover anyone by an excuse. Locke advises that parents should teach their children that honesty is more important than trying to cover up mistakes. He suggests that even multiple faults should be forgiven more easily than a single lie meant to avoid punishment. By emphasizing the value of truth over perfection, Locke believes children will learn to be open about their errors rather than resorting to dishonesty. Quote 35. Teach them humility, and to be good-natured if you can, and this sort of manners will not be wanting, civility being in truth nothing but a care not to show any slighting or contempt of anyone in conversation. Locke highlights the essence of civility, emphasizing that true politeness stems from humility and good nature, rather than from superficial gestures or formalities. If children are taught to be considerate and respectful, they will naturally adopt good manners. He suggests that excessive focus on ceremonial behaviors is less important than fostering genuine respect for others, which will ultimately lead to a more sincere form of civility. Quote 36. There cannot be a greater rudeness than to interrupt another in the current of his discourse. Locke points out that interrupting someone while they are speaking is one of the most disrespectful behaviors. It conveys disinterest in what the speaker has to say, and an assumption that the interrupter's words are more valuable. Locke encourages teaching children to patiently wait for others to finish speaking before offering their opinions, as this fosters respectful and thoughtful conversation. Quote 37. Young men should be taught not to be forward to interpose their opinions, unless asked, or when others have done and are silent. Locke advises that young people should be trained to share their opinions only when invited, or when the conversation has naturally reached a point where they can contribute. He promotes a humble approach to discourse, where one listens first and speaks second, ensuring that contributions are made in a respectful and considered manner. This practice not only demonstrates modesty, but also earns more favorable attention from others. Quote 38. If you can teach them to love and respect other people, they will, as their age requires it, find ways to express it acceptably to everyone, according to the fashions they have been used to. Locke emphasizes that teaching children to genuinely love and respect others will naturally lead them to find appropriate ways to express this as they grow older. Instead of imposing rigid rules of etiquette on children, Locke believes that instilling the core values of respect and kindness will ensure that their outward behavior aligns with these principles, regardless of the specific social customs they encounter. Quote 39. Nothing but obstinacy should meet with any imperiousness or rough usage. All other faults should be corrected with a gentle hand. Locke argues that harsh discipline should only be applied in cases of deliberate disobedience or obstinacy. For all other mistakes, gentle correction is more effective. He stresses the importance of kindness in teaching and suggests that a softer approach will foster a more positive relationship between the child and the tutor, leading to better learning and more willingness to follow instructions. Quote 40. The great skill of a teacher is to get and keep the attention of his scholar. Whilst he has that, he is sure to advance as fast as the learner's abilities will carry him. Locke highlights the importance of maintaining a student's attention, as it is crucial for effective learning. A skilled teacher not only gains the student's focus, but keeps it, ensuring that the student progresses at a pace aligned with their capabilities. Locke advises that teaching methods should be engaging and pleasant to foster a sustained interest in the subject. Quote 41. Let the awe he has got upon their minds be so tempered with the constant marks of tenderness and goodwill that affection may spur them to their duty and make them find a pleasure in complying with his dictates. Locke recommends balancing authority with kindness in teaching. He believes that when a teacher or parent combines discipline with affection, it motivates the child to willingly follow instructions. This balance of respect and love creates a more harmonious learning environment where the child feels encouraged to do their best out of both duty and a sense of connection with their instructor. Quote 42. If grammar ought to be taught at any time, it must be to one that can speak the language already. How else can he be taught the grammar of it? Locke argues that grammar should only be taught once a child has already learned to speak a language. He emphasizes that learning grammar is not about learning to communicate, but about refining and polishing speech. By focusing first on speaking, a child can develop a natural understanding of the language before delving into its technical rules. Locke advocates for a practical approach to learning languages, highlighting that grammar is best introduced when the child is ready to use it as a tool for eloquence. Quote 43. Let him sometimes translate Latin into English, but the learning of Latin being nothing but the learning of words, a very unpleasant business both to young and old, join as much other real knowledge with it as you can. Locke suggests that translating Latin should be accompanied by the study of other subjects that provide real, tangible knowledge. He acknowledges that memorizing Latin vocabulary can be dull for students and recommends making the process more engaging by integrating subjects like geography, anatomy, and natural sciences. This approach ensures that language learning is not isolated, but connected to broader educational experiences that stimulate the mind. Quote 44. If boys' invention be to be quickened by such exercise, let them make themes in English, where they have facility and a command of words, and will better see what kind of thoughts they have when put into their own language. Locke advocates for writing exercises in a child's native language rather than in Latin. He believes that writing in English allows children to express their thoughts more clearly and develop their creative abilities. By practicing composition in their own language, children can better understand their ideas and develop their communication skills, which will ultimately serve them more effectively than struggling to express themselves in Latin. Quote 45. There is nothing more ridiculous than to mix the rich and handsome thoughts and sayings of others with a deal of poor stuff of his own. Locke criticizes the practice of forcing children to memorize and recite large sections of classical texts, which often leads to awkward mixtures of elegant quotations and poorly constructed original ideas. He argues that this method does little to improve the student's own thinking or writing. Instead, Locke advocates for focusing on meaningful content that genuinely enhances a child's understanding and encourages thoughtful reflection, rather than relying on rote memorization. Quote 46. What the mind is intent upon and careful of, that it remembers best. Locke points out that memory is strengthened by focused attention and interest, not by repetitive memorization of arbitrary facts. He suggests that when a person is genuinely invested in understanding something, they are more likely to remember it. This natural method of retaining knowledge is more effective than the mechanical memorization often enforced in schools, as it aligns with the mind's inherent tendency to hold on to things that are perceived as important or meaningful. Quote 47. He that takes on him the charge of bringing up young men should have something more in him than Latin, more than even a knowledge in the liberal sciences. Locke stresses that educators should possess more than just academic knowledge. They should be people of virtue and good sense who can guide their students' moral and intellectual development. He believes that education is not solely about imparting facts, but also about shaping character. Teachers should be models of prudence and kindness, capable of nurturing both the intellect and the soul of their pupils. Quote 48. Languages are to be learned only by reading and talking, and not by scraps of authors got by heart. Locke argues that languages are best learned through practical use, reading and conversation, rather than by memorizing passages from classic texts. He believes that language learning should be an active process, involving direct engagement with the language rather than the passive memorization of excerpts. This method allows students to understand and use the language in real contexts, which is far more effective than rote learning. Quote 49. Though the world be full of systems of it, yet I cannot say, I know any one which can be taught a young man as a science, wherein he may be sure to find truth and certainty. Locke expresses his skepticism about the various systems of natural philosophy that claim to offer definitive truths. He suggests that while many systems exist, none can guarantee absolute certainty. However, he does not dismiss the value of studying these systems, as it is important for a young gentleman to be familiar with them for intellectual conversation and understanding. Locke emphasizes that such studies should be approached with an awareness that they offer hypotheses rather than unquestionable facts. Quote 50. His business is not so much to teach him all that is knowable, as to raise in him a love and esteem of knowledge, and to put him in the right way of knowing and improving himself when he has a mind to it. Locke emphasizes that the primary goal of education is not to fill a student with facts, but to cultivate a deep respect and passion for knowledge. A good educator should inspire curiosity and provide students with the tools and methods they need to continue learning independently. Locke believes that fostering a lifelong desire to learn is more valuable than merely imparting information. Quote 51. If this irksome study be put off to a little more advanced age, young men either have not resolution enough to apply it out of choice or steadiness to carry it on. Locke argues that language acquisition, especially of foreign languages, is most effective when begun early in life. He observes that if language learning is delayed, older students often lack the discipline and commitment to pursue it with dedication. Young minds are more adaptable and persistent in their efforts, making early education crucial for laying a strong linguistic foundation. Quote 52. Order and constancy are said to make the great difference between one man and another. Locke asserts that the ability to maintain order and consistency in one's studies and actions is what distinguishes successful individuals from others. He advises that a tutor should instill in students the importance of methodical thinking and organization in all intellectual pursuits. By mastering these habits, a student can approach learning more efficiently and make significant progress. Quote 53. He should be a person of eminent virtue and prudence, and with good sense, have good humor, and the skill to carry himself with gravity, ease, and kindness in a constant conversation with his pupils. Locke emphasizes that a tutor's character is as important as their knowledge. A good tutor should embody virtue, prudence, and a sense of humor, along with the ability to maintain a balance of authority and kindness. Locke suggests that a tutor's demeanor and moral example are crucial in shaping not only the intellectual, but also the ethical development of the student. Quote 54. Recreation is not being idle, but easing the wearied part by change of business. Locke challenges the notion that recreation means doing nothing. Instead, he argues that true recreation is found in engaging in different, less taxing activities that refresh the mind and body. He suggests that healthy manual labor or other constructive tasks can serve as a form of relaxation and diversion, providing both mental and physical rejuvenation. Quote 55. Merchants accompts, though a science not likely to help a gentleman to get an estate, yet possibly there is not anything of more use and efficacy to make him preserve the estate he has. Locke stresses the importance of financial literacy, particularly in the form of learning how to keep accounts for young gentlemen. While this knowledge may not help them acquire wealth, it is invaluable in helping them manage and preserve what they already have. Locke sees this practical skill as essential for ensuring long-term financial stability and responsibility. Some Thoughts Concerning Education by John Locke concludes by reinforcing the importance of molding both the character and intellect of children through consistent practice and rational encouragement, rather than through coercion or excessive discipline. Locke emphasizes the role of early habit formation in fostering self-control, independence, and a love for learning, which he sees as crucial to a child's future success. He advises against the use of forceful correction, suggesting that respect, rational conversation, and the cultivation of intrinsic motivation are far more effective tools for lifelong learning and virtuous behavior. Locke's vision of education is not just about academic training, but about preparing individuals for thoughtful, ethical participation in society.
Curious to dive into the mind of John Locke? With StudyLab Pro's Book GPT, it's possible. Ask questions, explore themes, and discover the depths of Some Thoughts Concerning Education in an entirely new way. Start your conversation now by clicking on our logo. And if you're hungry for more educational content, subscribe to our channel to keep discovering, learning, and growing. Want more than just videos? Click on our logo now to join us on our platform for multiple choice tests, in-depth content, and tools to help you ace your studies. Get started now.